Recording in progress.
Never ready. That's like a dead battery.
Yeah, funny.
Okay, so we're back today. I'm excited to did this last week, and y'all remember where we are in the timeline of the kings of Israel. No, the north has been overrun over a 3-year period. They were basically completely decimated by the Assyrians, and then they were split up and sent to different places. And then other conquered peoples that the Assyrians had taken over, they moved part of them into what used to be the northern kingdom of Israel. What was left of it. And there wasn't much left, which made it desolate. There's just the people have no identity, they have they have no hope. And that was what the Assyrians really edged their bets on. But Isaiah had started along with Hosea, a couple others, preaching to the north. But when it was captured and taken, Isaiah shifted his prophetic message to the south. And he's warning Judah, specifically Jerusalem in a lot of places, that if you follow the same path, which they have been, that even though they've got a real good king right now in Hezekiah, the people aren't following the path very well. So just goes to show that we can't blame everything on our leaders.
No, yeah.
We can blame a lot of it on it. We still have our own mindset and do things, the way we want them to, and usually what benefits us, not necessarily somebody else. So we are going to pick up here in Isaiah, chapter. I'll tell you here because I can't remember either.
Are you going to jump around again?
No, I'm not going to jump around today. I mean, we'll be in Isaiah. We may be in a couple of different chapters.
Anybody else want to Bible besides me?
So yeah, Isaiah chapter 2. So the word that Isaiah son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. See, now he's preaching to the south. In days to come, I've got that underlined because days to come could refer to near, or it could refer to far. Okay, so keep that in mind. The mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains. It shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many people shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Those are the same exact words that Micah did in Micah chapter 4.
Have Micah read Isaiah or vice versa?
No, we don't get that. We don't get that from this. It's just we assume that since these are the prophets are the mouth of God, pretty much, that God is giving these prophets the same exact message to preach to particular people. So also verse 1, the word that Isaiah son of Amos saw. It's interesting, not the word that Isaiah heard, but the word that he saw. So this is a vision of a word. And of course, that's where we get the concept of God's word being the Bible. So it could have been, this could be just a metaphor. It could be literal in the sense that he had this vision of a scroll or something. Usually it says, I saw a scroll, but so he could have seen something that he could read, or he could have seen, he could have just had a vision of it.
Yeah,
That he attributed to. Okay. Very good. Let's go. Ugh. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Oh, what beautiful Let us walk in the light of the Lord. You have forsaken your people, the house of Jacob, for they are full of diviners from the east and of soothsayers like the Philistines, and they clasp hands with foreigners. Their land is filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. Their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Their land is filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their own fingers have made. And so people are humbled, and everyone is brought low. Do not forgive them. I'm going to make a statement here real quick. Occasionally, I think I said this last week too, but occasionally you'll see the double brackets. There are instances where they've got texts that they have translated from that are reliable, but some of those texts have these statements and some of them don't. And so whenever you see these double brackets, one of the texts had it, another text did not, another reliable. Enter into the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of his majesty. The haughty eyes of people shall be brought low, and the pride of everyone shall be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted on that day. What day? The day that is coming. For the Lord of hosts has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up and high, against all the cedars of Lebanon, lofty and lifted up, and against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the high mountains, and against all the lofty hills, against every high tower, and against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the highly prized vessels. That's a lot of alls. Basically, Isaiah is giving this message saying that the Lord God Almighty is above all these other gods that claim these just different things. The God of the trees, the God of the sea, the God of the, those kind of things. So, and against every people who think they're better than God. The haughtiness of people shall be humbled, and the pride of everyone shall be brought low, and the Lord alone will be exalted on that. That's the second time he said that. The idol, whenever a prophet says something, it's important. Whenever he says it twice, you better listen. But if he says it a third time, uh-oh. The idol shall utterly pass away. Enter the caves of the rocks and the holes of the ground from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of his majesty when he rises to terrify the earth. On that day, people will throw away to the moles and to the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship. To enter the caverns of the rocks and the clefts and the crags from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of his majesty when he rises to terrify the earth. Now, that's interesting because the only other time we hear about God, well, there's two other times we hear about before this, God terrorizing the earth or doing something with the whole earth. One is creation. The other is Noah's flood, the flood narrative. And then at the end of the flood narrative, God promises Noah that he'll never destroy the earth with a flood again. So this seems to be referring to another time when the earth is going to be destroyed, which it obviously hasn't happened, but we're here.
We're not going ourselves.
Well, that's a possibility. Okay, now we got some more brackets there in verse 22. Turn away from mortals who have only breath in their nostrils, for of what account are they? It means just you're gonna come to a point where you're not gonna worship idols, but you're also not gonna worship people who set themselves up as idols.
What else would you have in there, Ron?
Well, who knows? I had a purple crayon up my nose one time. Had to go to the doctor to get them to X-ray. Way up there. Yeah, that's a story for another time too. For now the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, is taking away from Jerusalem and from Judah support and staff, all support of bread and all support of water, warrior and soldier, judge and prophet, diviner and elder, captain of 50 and dignitary, counselor and skillful magician and expert enchanter. And I will make youths their princes, and children shall rule over them. It's interesting because up to this point, we don't really know that Babylon's going to be the one that conquers them. They don't know that. But the way Babylon works is they come in, they take the children, they kill the soldiers, they take the children, and then set them up in the ways of Babylonian rulership. And then when they do come back, in this case, we find out 8 years later, and conquer the people, they moved them to the place that they stole their children to, took the children to, who are now under, in the Babylonian mindset, and have their own people rule over them in the Babylonian. So that's where we get Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were children that were stolen, when the Babylonians came in the first time. The people will be oppressed, everyone by another, everyone by a neighbor. The youth will be insolent to the elder, and the base to the honorable. Well, that first part's happened a couple of times. Civil War and the World War II. The second part of that, I think, is happening now. The youth will be insolent to the elder. Someone will seize a relative, a member of the clan, saying, "You have a cloak, you shall be our leader. This heap of ruins shall be under your rule." So it's kind of switched from verse 5, it's switched completely the other way around to verse 6. Things are going to be so bad that anybody with a coat is going to be considered rich. And they're going to set them up as their leader. They must know something. They still have a coat, which I don't have anymore. So I'm going to follow you. But the other will cry out on that day, saying, "I will not be a healer. In my house there is neither bread nor cloak. You shall not make me leader of the people." They're hurting too. They don't want to do it. For Jerusalem has stumbled and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces bears witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil on themselves. Tell the innocent how fortunate. Well, I need to put a break in it down. Tell the innocent how fortunate they are, for they shall eat the fruit of their labors. Woe to the guilty, how unfortunate they are, for what their hands have done shall be done to them. Oh, uh-oh. I think about some of the things I've done. And I don't want that happening to me. My people, their oppressors extort them, and creditors rule over them. Oh, my people, your leaders mislead you and confuse the course of your paths.
This was written a long time ago.
Well, in English, it was written more recent. Yes, yeah, there is a patristic bent on it. The Lord rises to argue his case. He stands to judge the peoples. The Lord enters into judgment with the elders and princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor, says the Lord God of hosts. On that day, the Lord will take away the finery of the anklets, the headbands and the crescents, the pendants, the bracelets and the scarves. Scarves? Or should that be scars? The headdresses, the armlets, the sashes, the perfume boxes and the amulets, the signet rings and nose rings. Oh, shit. Now, keep in mind, Isaiah is preaching to the southern kingdom. All those prophets that were preaching to the northern kingdom prior to this have been saying, the old cows of Bashan. The women in the north they reveled in their excess and their opulence. And so what's happening is the same thing is starting to happen in the South. That's what all this is getting to. Okay. That, you may have you may have a great king, but your priests may falter a little bit, but you still are set in your ways. You want to follow whatever God you want to follow. So even though Hezekiah tore down all the high places of these foreign gods, they still make them in their own homes. Karen and I, whenever we go by Kroger, well, I say by Kroger, really she's going into Hallmark or something, but there is a fingernail place there, and right in their front window on the ground is a little shrine to Buddha where they put fresh food and all that.
You see that in a lot of nail shops.
Huh.
The festal robes, the mantle, we're continuing their opposites here. The festal robes, the mantles, the cloaks, and the handbags. The handbags? You mean like Coach or whatever those other guys are?
Louis Vuitton.
Louis Vuitton, yeah. The garments of gauze, the linen garments, the turbans and the veils. Instead of perfume, there will be a stench. And instead of a sash, a rope. And instead of a well-styled hair, baldness, oh my gosh, there's not gonna be any hairstyle places. Clearly. And instead of and instead of a rich robe, a binding of sackcloth. Instead of beauty, shame. Now, it's interesting because when we can see the alternate, the positive and the negative here. They almost mimic each other as to what they are. A robe with a binding of sackcloth. Things like that. But when you get to beauty, we usually, in our frame of mind, what is the opposite of beauty? Ugliness. In this case, it's going to be shame. So,
Shameful and ugly.
your men shall fall by the sword and your warriors in battle, and her gates shall lament and mourn. That's how the Babylonians worked, is they came in, they besieged cities until they had killed most of the fighters. And her gates shall lament and mourn. Desolate she shall sit upon the ground. Isaiah 4:7, women shall take hold of one man on that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Just let us be called by your name. Take away our disgrace. So, yeah, there's going to be one guy for every 7 women.
Have you been in a nursing home lately?
Yeah. Yeah.
Watch.
When I went to Baylor, based on, now it wasn't over the whole campus, but the freshman class coming in, it was an 8-to-1 ratio of women to men when I went there at 80. And they had.
When I started A&M, it was like 500 to 1.
Right. Right. Well, Baylor being a Southern Baptist college, there's Baptists really push this idea of two being yoked. They're okay with marriage and relationships with each other, but of course it's one-on-one kind of thing. That's how our Western mindset typically is. But they wanted to make it easier for women and men to meet. They didn't want all this competition. So what they would do, like the week or the second week you were there, they had this, I can't remember the name of it, but the girls, because there was such an odd ratio, the girls would have water balloons, and attached to those water balloons were their name and phone number. And the guys would then run through the campus, and when they got hit, that paper would stick to them. That when I didn't get any. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Day of the
Bear. It happened really early on.
Yeah.
I mean, we had men cons when we first got there. Those are kind of like ambassadors. You meet with a group, and that you they're your confidence group. They're your peer group. If you have any problems, talk to them. Of course, they're mostly freshmen with a couple of upper.
The main part of the Delosa was student government elections that day. But it was a fun day.
Man, went to summer school day, and then the ratio was 1 to 30 in the class I was in. I walked in right on time, and there was 1 seat in the front row. And that's where I stayed the whole summer session.
I go into one of those huge lecture halls with 200 people. There'd be me and maybe one other girl.
Well, we have to look at how the ancient Near East is set up, in the sense that it's a patristic society. Even though women could own land, and land things came with them through marriage, the men ruled everything.
They still had to have a protector,
Right, and right,
a kinsman of some sort.
right, someone who did the work or the hiring of the work, and so to not be married was a disgrace. And yeah. Okay, verse 2, chapter 4. On that day, the branch of the Lord, what did that mean? Shall be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and glory of the survivors of Israel. Whoever is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. Everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem, once the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and by a spirit of burning. I think those are two parts of the sevenfold spirit. It's mentioned in several places in the New Testament. That's just me. Then the Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over its places of assembly a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night. What does that sound like?
Sounds like
Uh-huh.
Exodus.
Uh-huh.
And
Leading them out of captivity into freedom. Indeed, over all the glory there will be a canopy. It will serve as a pavilion, a shade by day from the heat, and a refuge and a shelter from the storm and rain. Chapter 5. I will sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. What does that sound like?
Song of Solomon.
Song of Solomon. And you notice that it went from narrative back into like a poetry, a verse. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, and it yielded rotten grapes.
The person speaking here would be female because he dug it. My beloved is a man.
It is God speaking. It is Isaiah giving a message about God.
Yeah, okay.
He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded rotten grapes. Now, some translations say wild grapes. It just means that everything he did for them to grow in a certain way, they grew some other way. They did it, they went on their own. And now inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to, that's it. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? When I expected it to yield grapes, why did it yield rotten grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a wasteland. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and it shall be overgrown with briars and thorns. I need to fix that slide. It's hard to read. It wasn't when I made it. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it.
What he's been doing.
Mm-hmm. So you think we're Israel, huh? or Judah? For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. So this answers your questions there as to who's who. The vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his cherished garden. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry. That in Hebrew is a play on word sounds. I can't for the life of me think of the words right now, but it would be something like saying, it would be like alliteration to the Jews, using the same, like Hadad instead of Hadid. So justice and bloodshed would have kind of that same, they sound similar, but with just one little difference.
so in Hebrew, it would be the alliterations.
Correct. In Hebrew, there would be that. And same thing with righteousness and crime. Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field until there is room for no one, and you are left to live alone in the midst of the land. That's basically saying whoever's left is going to be taking up whatever they can get, and they're going to be fending for themselves. And if they leave their kinsmen out in the cold, so what? The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but one bath, and a homer of seed shall yield a mere ephah. Those are just measurements of grain in wine. Woe to those who rise early in the morning in pursuit of strong drink, who linger in the evening to be inflamed by wine, whose feasts consist of lyre and harp, tambourine and flute and wine, but who not regard the deeds of the Lord or see the work of his hands. Notice it doesn't say shofar. So you're okay to sound it out. Therefore, my people go into exile for lack of knowledge. Their nobles are dying of hunger, and their multitude is parched with thirst. Therefore, Sheol, that's where we get the word hell, has enlarged its appetite and opened its mouth beyond measure. The nobility of Jerusalem and her multitude go down, her throng and all who exult in her. People are bowed down, everyone is brought low, and the eyes of the haughty humble. That's what all this has been about. This is the sin. This is the ultimate sin against God, is pride. It is, and pride is putting anything else in place of God. Typically ourselves, but it can be anything. But the Lord of hosts is exalted by justice, and the holy God shows himself holy by righteousness. Then the lambs shall graze as in their pasture, fatted calves and kids. That's not little, shall be among the ruins. Woe to those who drag iniquity along with cords of falsehood, who drag sin along as with cart ropes, who say, let him make haste, let him speed his work that we may see it. Let the plan of the Holy One of Israel hasten to fulfillment that we may know it. Come on, God, hurry up. Fix us. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Now you know where that phrase came from. Who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. I am the smartest man who ever lived.
Don't be so smart.
And shrewd in their own sight. Watch me get away with this. Woe to those who are heroes in drinking wine and valiant at mixing drink. I make the greatest screwdriver. Who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocent of their rights. Therefore, as the tongue of fire devours from stubble, and as dry grass sinks down in the flame, so their root will become rotten and their blossom go up like dust. For they have rejected the instruction of the Lord of hosts and have despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. There's that word again. Word. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against his people, and he stretched out his hand against them and struck them. The mountains quaked, and their corpses were like refuse in the street. For all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. He will raise a signal for a nation far away and whistle for a people at the ends of the earth. Here they come, swiftly, speedily. None of them is weary, none stumbles, none slumbers or sleeps. Not a loincloth is loose, not a sandal strap broken. Their arrows are sharp, all their bows strung, their horses' hoofs, should that be hooves, seem like flint, and their wheels like the whirlwind. Their roaring is like a lion. Like young lions, they roar, they growl and seize their prey. They carry it off, and no one can rescue. They will roar over it on that day, like a roaring of the sea. And if one look to the land, only darkness and distress, and the light grows dark with its clouds. So this is something, he started off in the present tense or in the past tense, and here in verse 26, he immediately goes into future tense. He will raise, and then he goes into present, which just a writing style.
So he's still talking about Judah.
Yeah, that's all that remains. Although, remember, the word of the Lord could be, the day of the Lord could be soon, it could be later. On to Isaiah 13. So we're skipping a few chapters now, because we already read chapter 6 back earlier. Israel was about to get destroyed. The oracle concerning Babylon. Now we see them that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw. The word oracle there is a word in Hebrew, nasa. Okay. That is where we get the word NASA.
Not exactly.
No, but it's pronounced like NASA. But it means burden. And so the word for oracle there is burden. The burden concerning Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw. He was burdened by this news. Okay. So NASA. On a bare hill, raise a signal, cry aloud to them, wave the hand for them to enter the gates of the nobles. I myself have commanded my consecrated ones to execute my anger. Listen, a tumult on the mountains as of as of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar of kingdoms, of nations gathering together. The Lord of hosts is mustering an army for battle. They come from a distant land, from the end of the heavens. The Lord and the weapons of his indignation destroy the whole earth. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will be feeble and every human heart will melt, and they will be terrified. Pains and agony will seize them. They will be in anguish like a woman in labor. Is that how that feels? Anguish? No. They will look aghast at one another. Their faces will be aflame. See, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the earth a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world. That's happening in 2 weeks. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pride of the arrogant and lay low the insolence of tyrants. I will make mortals more rare than fine gold and humans than the gold of Ophir. Therefore, I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place at the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger. Like a gazelle on the run, or like sheep with no one to gather them, all will turn back to their own people, and all will flee to their own lands. Whoever is found will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Okay, things get a little graphic. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered and their wives raped. See, I am stirring up the Medes against them. Who is them? The Babylonians. So we're quite a ways, we're 100 years away at this point. Who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of the womb. So they don't like underwear either. Oh, I'm sorry, fruit of the womb. Their eyes will not see children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pride of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. Arabs will not pitch their tents there. Shepherds will not make their flocks lie down there. But wild animals will lie down there, and its houses will be full of howling creatures. Their ostriches will live, and their goat demons, and their goat demons will dance. Hyenas will cry in its towers, and jackals in the pleasant palaces. Its time is close at hand, and its days will not be prolonged.
So Babylon's gonna be punished?
Correct. Babylon, just like the Assyrians, were raised by God to discipline the northern kingdom. Babylon is going to be raised by God, or challenged by God to give discipline to the southern kingdom. The problem is both of these nations took it upon themselves to take it so much further, to the destruction of many people. And so you're right. Even the Babylonians are going to conquer the Assyrians, and then the Medes and Persians are going to come in, and they're going to conquer Babylon.
And if that has already happened or it's going to happen?
Well, it will happen. We've still got about 40 years or so before Babylon really starts to make their entrance into the South, make their presence really, really known and feared across the world. And then another 30 years before Judah is conquered. So, and then they will be in captivity for about 70 years. When the Medes come in, the Persians, you got Darius and Cyrus who come in, and they're pretty nice. They, at least they sound that way. They let the Israelites go back to their homeland, but really, when you look at it, it's like, okay, we've just defeated the Babylonians in war. We've completely obliterated, even though they didn't. Their Babylonians have moved a little westward. They're doing other things, but the Medes and Persians, they don't want to have the responsibility of taking care of all these people. Let them go home. So So that's kind of, and then of course, you get. You know, a little while after that, you get Alexander the Great that comes in. And initiates this great push for the Greeks to start doing their thing. So that's kind of the progression. And when we get into Daniel, we'll hear, you know, that tower is a comparison of the next four kingdoms, is what they so. But when we get into Daniel, we'll get it. I wanted to talk about verse 20, verse 19 and 20. So Babylon, specifically, the city of Babylon, where it started, where it was built, that's true. It hasn't, once it was overthrown, no major civilization has lived. What is now known as Babylon is actually a couple miles away in a slightly different spot. But when Saddam Hussein was in power, he was trying to rebuild Babylon. Even made coinage, minted coinage that had his face on one side and Nebuchadnezzar's on the other, trying to set himself up as the new Nebuchadnezzar. So, but he's dead now. Okay, so next week, we're still going to be in Isaiah a little bit, but then we're going to get into Proverbs. And you notice there at the end, it says, further wise sayings of Solomon. Now, why do you think we're getting back to Solomon, who's been, we ain't talked about in a long time? It's because not all of Solomon's Proverbs were known when they were originally written down. They got lost. Well, what happens is Hezekiah or people there have found them. So Hezekiah has put them back out into circulation. And so these are the Proverbs that Hezekiah put out that are attributed to Solomon. So they were lost for 100 years. Okay, any questions, concerns, criticisms, complaints?
Very good news.
What happened to my share? Boy, I sure hope I shared that. That'd be horrible. I have to go home and redo this. Ooh, score. What's the score? They're playing in London today, so there's probably a game actually going on.
Europe holds off United States.
Okay.
Claims equal. Ryder Cup.
Okay. Well, y'all have a good day. We'll see y'all in worship. Today is World Communion Sunday. It's going to be an awesome time, I think. You're going to be able to experience communion in a whole new light today. And today is also World Vegetarian Day. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Yep, World Vegetarian Day. Y'all have a good time and see y'all next week.